Hi, so my name is Nick Hosseini, or Nick for short. This is a simple economics tutorial for an A-level student or even a GCSE student. And this is about the law of demand or the demand curve in general. So we'll start with the basic definition. So we'll ask you, what is your definition of demand in your everyday life? Exactly, purchasing of goods. And in economics, we have to be a bit more precise and also succinct with our definitions. So we'll say the quantity of good or service that consumers are both willing and able to buy at a given price in a given period of time. And you notice willing and able are capitalized because that is so important and so fundamental when studying demand, even supply, and other concepts in economics from an A-level standpoint, especially. And it's something examiners look for. They look for those two words in your definition answers, and it's something that can get you 3 marks. So it's worth knowing. So we'll start with the law of demand quickly, and ceteris paribus, which feeds directly into it. So the law of demand is simple. It's the relationship between price and quantity and how the demand curve is formed from it. So as you can see on the left diagram, with a pen, the left diagram here, demand is downward sloping. There's an inverse relationship between price and quantity. So inverse, what does that mean? So we'll start at the initial equilibrium, P1, Q1. What happens when price rises? Quantity should fall, correct, yeah. So if the price of bread rose from £1 a loaf to £2 a loaf overnight, price increased drastically, so quantity should fall. Logically, quantity should fall, and it goes vice versa too. So what happens if price increases? Price decreases. Quantity should increase. So if the price of gold fell by 50% overnight, quantity would rise, obviously, because people want to profit. They want to buy gold. There's a huge market for gold. If there's a massive price decrease, people are going to buy gold. So yeah, these are price movements along the market. I'll get into that in a second. So we had an example initially when price was to rise and quantity demand falls, and that is a contraction of demand when price rises and quantity demand falls. And when price falls and quantity demand rises, it's an extension or expansion of demand. Yeah, and these are price movements along the curve, not shifts. Shifts we'll get into in a second. So there are two effects that feed into the law of demand and demand curve in general. And it's the income effect and the substitution effect. Income effect is simple. It's just if people have less income, the willingness and ability, as we said in the definition, to buy goods and services changes, right? Same as substitution. If price of other goods change relative to the good in question or vice versa, that the demand of the good will change. It's simple logic. It's just basic logic. And also it's worth noting that this is an inverse relationship. And I said that before, I'll write it again. Inverse relationship between price and quantity, giving a downward sloping demand curve. And that is important to know, that the demand curve is downward sloping, unlike the supply curve. And we'll get into that hopefully next time. And the shifts, as I said before, they're influenced by price factors, as I have down here. Price factors, and they cause movements along the demand curve or schedule. I think in most economics courses, especially at A-level, they're called the curve. Either one is fine. Demand curve, you may also find they look more like this instead of just a straight horizontal line like this. Both of them, analysis would be exactly the same. They're the same thing, but it's contentious. Some people have it that way, some people have it the other way. So that is what causes movements. So now we're going to a bit more complicated topic, and these are shifts. Demand curve shifts. As you can see, we have a demand curve D1 here, and certain factors cause it to either shift outwards or inwards, right or left. And these factors, the ones you need to know, have been displayed in this acronym here that I didn't come up with, but it's very useful. And so it's specific, spelled incorrectly, I know, but this is what you need to know to remember it. So substitutes is the S instead of the C. But yeah, so it's population, advertising, substitutes, income, fashion or trend, interest rates, and complements. And all of these shift the demand curve in one way or another, outwards or inwards, depending on the change. So population, for example, if population was to increase in a country, let's just say Iceland have a massive influx of immigrants for whatever reason. What happens to a demand of milk, for example? Let's just say milk. It should shift outwards, right? Because there's more people. It's a necessity. Milk, you can argue, and yeah, it's going to increase the demand, and vice versa. Say if a country has a mass exodus of people leave for whatever reason, demand will fall. Quantity demanded will fall from D1 to D3, and in the previous example, it's from D1 to D2, which causes the equilibrium quantity Q1 to shift out either way, depending on the case. Okay, so advertising, let's say Sony advertised their PS5 like they did. That should, what should the effect be? If there's increased advertising, more people know about it, demand should shift outwards. More people want the product, quantity demand will increase. So Q1 increases to Q2, D1 shifts outwards to D2, and vice versa. Let's talk about the Sun, for example, a newspaper everyone loves. They get a lot of bad press. Let's just say the press this time they got was worse, and less people buy the paper. What happens to it? Demand shifts inwards to D3 from D1, and it goes without saying for all of these examples. It just depends which way. Is it a fact? The factors all shift the demand curves. Does it shift it outwards anyways? That's the only thing you need to ascertain. We'll do one more example. So complements. What is a complement? A complementary good. So if you have tea, what is one good that goes well with tea, that everyone loves with tea? It's sugar, right? So if the price of sugar, this is interesting because one product's good affects another. One product price affects another's demand, right? That's why it's interesting. A bit more tricky, but it's very simple. So complement. So if tea was to rise by, so let's just say sugar, it might be a bit more simple. If the price of sugar was to rise because India, a large exporter of sugar, no longer could export it to the UK for whatever reason, maybe a law was passed, or a quota was passed, and the price of sugar doubles overnight, people's demand for tea may fall. So we're talking about the demand for tea with respect to the price of sugar. So that would cause D1 to shift down to D3 because the price of sugar has increased, and as it's a close complement to tea, people's quantity demanded for tea will fall. It's a bit tricky, but yeah, once you wrap your head around it, it goes for any complementary good. It's very simple. So that is a demand curve shift. These are all shifts and movements. Movements are price factors. Shifts are non-price factors, as you can see with the acronym, non-price factors. And it's very, very important to distinguish between the two. And it may look a bit complicated at first, but it's something that you'll know like the back of your hand in no time. It's very simple. Yeah, so that's the tutorial on the law of demand, the demand curve in general. The next thing from here would be the supply curve and the law of supply. It's a simple topic as well, and then you can combine the two to create the market equilibrium, and that is something that can be done at a later date. Yep, thanks a lot for watching. Goodbye.